I just got back from teaching a sketchbook retreat in France. I met the most amazing women, there was beautiful scenery and wonderful food. Hi, I'm Omar. I'm an artist, illustrator and author. I help artists improve their skills by sharing my knowledge from filling 40 sketchbooks. In this video I'm going to share all the sketches I created whilst I was out there and some more since I returned, filled with inspiration. This is my third trip to the Côte d'Azur and there's something about this region that really brings out the best in me. I discover so much more about myself and my art. I only had a few pages left of sketchbook number 38. You might recognise some of the pieces at the beginning. This was from the very first evening that I was in Hyeres. I don't know if I pronounced that right. The organiser of the retreat took me and my photographer Natalie to a peninsula just outside of town called Le Cap, and it was a beautiful evening. The sun was just beginning to set. I don't think I've done it justice. I wanted to point out these little dots which are actually flamingos, and this is my version of the pool at the accommodation that we stayed at. It was such a vivid blue against all the different dark greens and the pops of the pinks on the oleander. This is Natalie. She swam probably 2 or 3 times a day and it was incredibly hot while we were out there. I think they were just starting a heat wave. I really like the way I've done the negative space around this area here, picking out some of the leaves. Then the rest of the guests arrived. I was really nervous and I was listening to them talking. This is Betty Jo and Cynthia, and they had travelled basically 24 hours all the way from the northwest of America to come to this retreat. So it was a really, really relaxed setting there. And this one was painted a few days later when we were out on an island called Pocquerolles. This beach was called Notre Dame and I swam to all the way to the other side to look at these rock formations. I'm a real nerd. I like looking at rocks, although I'm not a geologist. I wish I'd taken my camera. They were stunning. I know I'm geeking out now. This is the sketchbook that I started out there. Got given a lovely cutout version of France, which I intend to fill in somehow. First of all, we started creating these textures. Hopefully you've seen my YouTube video about how I do these. I'll give you a link in the description below. So I got everybody to do that, and immediately we went out to the chateau, the ruined castle at the top of the town. It was a very scenic and beautiful area with all the remains of the ancient castle. I believe it dates back from about the 11th century, and I led the group through just a really simple exercise where I talked about edges mainly. It's just the getting in the vertical edges here, and that edge here against that landscape was kind of a key moment for me, and that's the little houses that you could see in the background. And I didn't know that it was going to be sunset, but I think that the background really enhanced that feeling. This must have been later on that evening as we were sat down for dinner. This is Manon and Chris. We were just chatting, getting to know each other really. And the next outing was over to Parc Saint Bernard. Sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation. It was a gorgeous park that went downhill and we were just really looking at shapes and picking out shape. What I got them to do as a quick exercise was I gave them about half an hour to look at negative spaces. There were some beautiful botanicals. This one on the left is what I demoed, and then that evening I decided to fill the rest of this spread. This is actually garlic. This was not at the botanical gardens. Now, this would have been on the boat to Pocquerolles. We were only on a 10-minute boat ride and I just decided to sketch her because she was just sitting opposite me, and I have a tendency to whip out my sketchbook at every opportunity now, and I think she was pleased with the result. I only painted this version of her when she was at the market once I got back, because I wanted to sort of bring the narrative through, especially because her hat was so recognisable. Now this piece I did while we were there. I'm not overly pleased with it. I think I should have waited until I got back and worked on a much bigger version. However, I think they were quite pleased. I do, however, like this mess of tangled foliage in the background. I think that's actually the best feature of this piece. Maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on myself. And some of the water is quite nice. This was a sunset picnic. Absolutely stunning evening. I don't think I've done justice to the sunset, but I really enjoyed painting along with everybody. This sunset picnic really was quite amazing, to be able to swim in that crystal clear blue water and then come out and have this amazing spread of food and cheese, and then enjoy the rest of the sunset with like-minded, really beautiful people. I felt so lucky and grateful. This is Amy and Chris. They were sitting opposite me during our picnic lunch in Le Poquerolles. I have real difficulties with foreshortening, but I think overall it's a pretty nice piece that I've captured. And this is Amy a little bit later on when we were at the pool. And I believe this would have been in the afternoon, the late afternoon, before we caught the ferry back. It was so hot and we were so tired. We just decided to sit down at a cafe and draw what we saw in front of us. I did this the other day once I got back. I just thought that the colouring here sort of lent itself to nectarines and peaches based on a photo I had of the market day. This was created when I was there, so this is textured background that I created, and this is unfinished. I could probably work into this a lot more to give a better idea of the scenery that I saw in Poquerolles. Now this, again, I did very recently. I'm actually going to be releasing a video of how I created these. It was a timed study. I'll tell you more in the next video. One of the days, because the setting of this venue was such a lush landscape, I got them to paint a whole load of greens. How they're able to create different greens by adding, touches of purple or red. It really helped them, I think. And then after that exercise, we looked again at negative space, but this time using watercolour and colour pencil. So we were going down a more mixed media route. I quite like this one. It's almost Van Gogh-like in the textures that I've got in the pencil there. This was on the cookery day. We went to a local cookery school where we learnt how to create stuffed vegetables and also apricot tart, and I painted this just as we were waiting for the lunch table before it was set. This is the actual cookery school here. It's a beautiful building from the 1930s, and it's part of the community now, and they create amazing food there. As a food illustrator, I think it's really important to capture all aspects of the food, including the making of. It's something that I don't do very much these days. Just to remind you, I used to be an editorial illustrator, so I have the experience of doing figure work quite quickly. This was just done from reference photos straight into watercolour. There's no pencil underneath. I was really eager to get these sketches done quickly. There was just something about them, and I was very grateful that I was able to capture such lovely poses, especially for me as a food illustrator. These were just wonderful to try and portray. More scenes from that day. This is Bob. He was such an amazing personality and was talking to everybody. He was so funny and very, very generous, very kind. This is when they're setting up the table, and this plate of gorgeousness was called soccer, which was a chickpea pancake that we all took turns in creating. I'll show you a few more poses from that. This is Vicky, and that's Eva, and like I said, we all took turns making these beautiful chickpea flour pancakes, and I had a go. I really enjoyed it. This is Cynthia and Matu, who was incredibly patient with us throughout the whole week. This is from a reference photo by Natalie. I really love the dynamic in this image. I wanted to really capture some of the details in her dress, and then I got completely bogged down with the foreshortening of his arm. I'm not sure if I've achieved it. I think it's a bit awkward. This is one of the very recent pieces. It was the day back at the market where we were buying fruit as reference for the next day. If I'm doing figure work, I usually give an outline with a brown or grey coloured pencil, and that's enough information for me to start applying the watercolour afterwards, which I'm going to show you now. So I'm looking at the yellow of the lady's dress. I'm applying it quite flat. There's not much dimension in this. I think for me, I just want to give enough information for the essence of the scene. It was people lining up at a particular market store where we were buying watermelon for the next day's reference. This is actually a combination of two photos that I took, and I really liked some of the people in the background, so I've managed to draw them in as well. This lady with the hat is actually Eva, and I just spotted her, a tiny figure in one of my photos, and also this guy, he had such a lovely pose. Later on I decided that this lady who was receiving the watermelon needed a bit more definition, so I used negative space, which is where I'm applying that green around her just to define her arm and her head a bit more. And to give this piece a little bit more context, I decided to add the parasol that all the market traders have, and it's this beautiful yellow contraption. Originally I had wanted to demo in the marketplace with all the traders, but it was incredibly busy and space was tight, so probably would have been overwhelming. I've got this version instead, which I think still captures some of that energy. Really pleased with how it's turned out. And because of the light there, it must have been nearing midday. There was really a lot of shadows playing around, and I wanted to capture some of it. I think this piece is better than this piece. I probably worked into it a little bit too much, and I couldn't decide what was going on. But even so, it's a pretty good study. I took a larger sketchbook. This is the A4 size Hahnemuller because I wanted to demo on the studio day a whole load of different mixed media textures. I started off with watermelon because I thought it was fail-safe, so these were really quick studies. First of all, we've got a watercolour version, and in the background here is watercolour, but I use the acrylic markers to create negative space around it in order to bring out the shape of that watermelon half. This piece here is collage. Use acrylic paint to create this texture and then cut it out into this triangular shape. And this one was using neo colours, and again using a bit of negative space. This was actually just a line I painted on using one of the acrylic markers and Posca pen to mark out that area. What else have we got here? This is acrylic markers underneath. The rind of this watermelon is pencil, and this one here is neo colour again, and I used the acrylic markers to just very graphically make this triangular piece. We had some more studies of fruit in mixed media. I really wanted to provide everybody with, let's say, a toolbox of mixed media techniques that they could take away with them and use in different ways, not just in fruit. And I talked a little bit about being a food illustrator And fruit is such an easy subject to portray because a lot of the shapes and the colours are so recognisable. These are apricots. I think this might be my favourite one with the shadow here. And there's so many ways you can portray them, and I just love exploring like this, and I think it's important for me as a food illustrator to keep doing that. Love these strawberries. So what I did first was to lay down a wash of pinky red watercolour, just quite random, and then let it dry. And the strawberries came in a lovely punnet. I specifically wanted to capture that, and I was able to do that by blocking out the background using the Prussian blue acrylic marker. And then once this area was dry, I went into it with some of the brush pens and also coloured pencil. I talked a lot about looking at the darkest places and adding those areas in order to create the shapes of the strawberries. Part of the afternoon studio session was figure work. And this guy I saw at the market, he's in the act of unzipping his top here so that he could expose his belly. He was really hilarious, and I've just caught him before he did the deed. And that's actually the punnet of strawberries that you see here. And I think I've captured his expression. So I got the students to try and just do a wash, basic shapes of arms, faces, legs, and I think this is an easier way of exploring figure work. At the end of the week, we had a show and tell where everybody went through their sketchbooks and talked about what they'd created during the last 6 days. I also presented the host family a postcard of their house, and they were really touched. They did such a marvellous job of looking after us and taking us to all the different venues. I also want to extend a massive thank you to the beautiful, amazing, powerful women that I met during this week. I really learnt so much about gratitude, staying grounded, being humble, looking for the positivity in all situations. I do think Simple Life in Provence have created this unique experience that facilitates real and human connections. The small group meant that we really bonded and got to know each other. I've come back as a much better artist and illustrator and a much more rounded human because of the amazing interactions I had with everybody there. I don't know how I think you have to experience an art retreat to understand all the myriad of emotions that you go through. I'm just hugely grateful that I get to experience a life that is aligned with my goals and my aspirations.